So I think the upcoming Legion Remix event is going to have a big impact on the future of World of Warcraft. Now, if you haven't been following WoW news for a while, Legion Remix has been confirmed multiple times now. We've gotten some further information on rewards and new systems we can expect in this event. And based upon all of the information we have, I legitimately think some of these new things they're trying in Legion Remix is actually just tests for the future of the game in general, and I think these systems could work really well in the rest of the game. Now, Legion Remix was originally teased when we got our 2025 roadmap for World of Warcraft, where on the roadmap there was this strip that had the different seasons of the year, and towards autumn and winter it started to turn fell green. Then we got a bunch of teases from Ian Hazzikostas and other developers that it could very well be a fell tinge. And then during a PAX East panel for 2025, which happened a few months ago, we finally got it officially confirmed that Legion Remix will be coming at the end of the year. Most likely we will be getting this in winter of 2025. We may get it a bit sooner, but I think the earliest we would get it would probably be October. Now, before we get into some of the specifics of what Legion Remix is going to have in it, we have to go over what a remix event actually is, because if you've never heard about this, our first remix event was Miss Pandaria Remix, and a remix event is essentially allowing you to replay the entirety of an expansion. So every update, every piece of new content, the entirety of a full expansion exists within Remix, but they also give us a bunch of new progression systems. So for instance, in Miss Pandaria Remix, we got a bind on account cloak that pretty much anything we did within the remix, we would get these random stat buffs to it that gave permanent and almost infinitely stacking stat increases. So things like experience, all of our main stats, crit, movement speed, all that type of stuff would just constantly be upgrading this cloak, and it would be for any character on the remix event. So you start a new character, that cloak would already be massively buffed up for that new character, and then any gear you got during that event was completely new gear with all of these new sockets, and then we would be earning all of these new gems that gave a bunch of new passive effects, and a few of the slots gave us active effects. So essentially we also got a movement ability as a new active ability, and then essentially an ultimate ability on a longer cooldown. But then all of the other gear also had all these gems you would put into them that would give you crazy new effects, and anything you did in this event would also give you a new currency called bronze, where you would either use that bronze on upgrading your gear to just give it more stats, or to buy a ridiculous amount of different cosmetics, which were essentially all of the weapon cosmetics and gear sets and mounts from the entirety of the expansion, including a bunch of new cosmetics that were never obtainable and a bunch of recolors of obtainable cosmetics from that expansion. And that's the general gist of the first remix event we got. You could play through the entirety of the expansion with these completely new progression systems and completely new, very rewarding currency to allow you to just get a ridiculous amount of cosmetics while making these absurdly overpowered characters. But that brings us into Legion Remix, and Legion Remix can be very different because of the expansion that Legion was. Remember, Miss Pandaria, we didn't have any borrowed power, but then going into Legion, we had a bunch of borrowed power systems. We had the infinite AP grind, we had our artifact weapons, later we had the Netherlight Crucible, we had all of these different borrowed power systems that are in some way going to play into Legion Remix, which will also probably change up how the gearing is going to work in Legion Remix compared to Miss Pandaria Remix. And that does throw a pretty big wrench into how much we can actually theorize or guess on for Legion Remix, because I think how progression works is going to be very, very different, but I think it may actually be quite a lot better than Miss Pandaria Remix, because one of the big issues everybody ran into was bronze was the currency you got in Miss Pandaria Remix, and that was both used to upgrade your gear, which costs a lot, and to buy all of the cosmetics and cosmetic rewards, which transfer over to the rest of your account permanently. So most likely one big change will be a different currency for upgrading your gear and a different currency for getting all of the cosmetics, but we don't know how the progression and and currency is going to play into all of the Legion systems, because more than likely they would want to tie in some type of progression system into the artifact weapon and into things like the Netherlight Crucible, because more than likely the entirety of the expansion again is going to be available right from the start. And while we don't know how the progression is going to work, we actually know of a few systems that are going to be in Legion Remix that's going to make it a lot more interesting than Mists of Pandaria Remix was. First off, being the Shattered Timeline. This is the main thing that I think is a test for the future of World of Warcraft. This is something I very much wanted them to do for World of Warcraft for a long time now, and I think this is going to be really cool. So the Shattered Timeline is essentially world tiers from Diablo to buff up the difficulty of the open world, because something you could do in Mists of Pandaria Remix was you could actually just go do all of the quest lines and do the open world stuff, and you would still progress pretty effectively compared to everything else, because you would still get bronze, which you got from everywhere, and you would still get the permanent stat increases, which you got from everywhere. But in Legion Remix, they're taking that up a notch with the Shattered Timeline. So this will be introducing these new difficulties called the Shattered Timeline, which is essentially this opt-in difficulty setting, which will increase the difficulty of the open world. They were explaining this as like an alternate timeline where everything went much worse and everything in the open world is just super dangerous and very difficult to fight against. So this is essentially trying to turn all of the open world content into endgame content by having these multiple difficulties you can change while in the open world. And that's pretty fitting with Legion, because that's the first time we also got world quests and kind of a renewed interest in trying to make more activities in the open world. And while this is something that's obviously being tested in Legion Remix, I think this is something that could very well be applied to future WoW expansions to make the open world itself just a pillar of the endgame. Because that's something they kind of tried to do with the War Within with delves, but realistically the rest of the open world is still easy. It's just delves that kind of push you more into the endgame. But with a system like this, essentially world tiers in the open world, you could push the entirety of the open world into another endgame pillar. And then another system that's going to be in Legion Remix is Mythic Plus. Legion was the first expansion where we got Mythic Plus, and we will be getting this in Legion Remix. So Mythic Plus will just be fully available as it was in Legion Remix, but you will be able to go much higher levels, obviously, and they're allowing us to do that. I think the levels will essentially be infinite. I don't remember if they said infinite or up to like level 100 or something, but with the item scaling, the permanent stat increases, and all the crazy effects we could get in Mists of Pandaria Remix, it's going to be at least similar or even crazier in Legion Remix. So we are definitely going to be seeing some of the most ridiculous stuff in Mythic Plus for Legion Remix. And while I think Shattered Timeline is super interesting and something that's going to be potentially really good for the future of the game, I think Mythic Plus in Legion Remix is just going to be the funnest part because of how many different possible combinations are going to be, broken combinations are going to be, people doing just crazy stuff in Mythic Plus. We already have some crazy strategies and crazy things done in normal Mythic Plus, but once we get all of these new effects, kind of infinite scaling, Legion Remix Mythic Plus is going to be crazy, and I think it's just going to be very, very fun. Now, another pretty big system is the Mage Tower, but we haven't gotten any information on how the Mage Tower is actually going to work. The only thing we know is that the Mage Tower artifact appearances will not be obtainable. We'll go more over that as we get into the rewards that we know of so far. Presumably the Mage Tower will still exist and you'll be able to do it even if you won't be able to get the Mage Tower artifact appearances, because we still have the Mage Tower in the game right now. You just get different rewards than you got when it was active in Legion. So presumably the Mage Tower will just be active and they will probably just be giving you the rewards you can get in the live game right now, or maybe there will be like recolors of the stuff we can get in the live game right now. We just know there won't be the old Mage Tower artifact appearances. And that's just all of the content we know of, but again, we don't know how progression is going to work, which is going to be massive because, as I mentioned, we have artifact weapons, we have a legendary gear, which may also just be in Legion Remix, we have the Netherlight Crucible, we have so many different pieces of progression that they're probably going to try to fit in to Legion Remix with the crazy amount of just different gems and all the different things we had in Mists of Pandaria Remix. Remix. But we do know of some rewards that are going to be in Legion Remix, because keep in mind, Mists of Pandaria Remix was, I think, the most cosmetically rewarding thing that's ever been added in World of Warcraft in its entire history. You could legitimately get every single leveling set, raid set, even some recolors of unobtainable PvP sets. You could get all of the different super rare mounts. You could get a bunch of new cosmetics. You could get recolors of a bunch of cosmetics. There was just so much there that you could get absurd amounts of cosmetics and mounts and things very quickly. And for Legion Remix, it's going to be crazier because the developers have pretty much just said that there will be even more cosmetics able to be obtained through Legion Remix than the last Remix event, which is going to be crazy. But we did get some specifics. So first off, the things we won't be able to obtain. The Mage Tower artifact appearances we won't be able to get. We won't be able to get the artifact weapon appearances specifically from PvP. I think some of them are still obtainable, but some of them aren't. It's kind of weird how artifact appearances are obtainable in the live game right now, because some stuff is still technically obtainable, but some quests don't exist anymore, so you can't obtain it. But you can't obtain those, and then we can't obtain seasonal PvP gear. So the stuff that you usually need raiding to obtain, you won't be able to get that either. All the other stuff you're still just able to get in the live game anyway. But we do know of some stuff that will be obtainable. So first off, some retired rewards will actually be able to get, one of them being the mythic Chosen Dead ensembles. These are full set appearances you could get from the Trial of Valor raid in the Legion expansion, but the mythic coloration wasn't obtainable after Legion ended. You can still go get the colorations from Raid Finder, Normal, and Heroic, but you couldn't get mythic, and I think mythic were actually the best colors by far. But we will be able to again obtain the mythic Chosen Dead sets. We surprisingly will be able to obtain the Violet Spellwing mount, which was the Antorus ahead of the Curve mount, which is very interesting that that is being returned. And then we will also be able to obtain the Legion pre-launch event armor sets. So there were different armor sets for each one of the armor types in the Legion pre-patch event, which is still the best pre-patch event I think in the game's history. And those sets in my opinion aren't super interesting, but you'll be able to obtain those 4 additional armor sets as well if you want those. And in the official post that talked about all this information, we also know there's going to be a bunch of just straight new cosmetics that were never obtainable in the game before. And there will also be previously unavailable color variants of Legion rewards, which they did both of these things in Mists of Pandaria Remix as well. And I think they did also specifically say that there will just be more cosmetics available from Legion Remix than from Mists of Pandaria Remix, which would make sense because there were just a lot more cosmetics available to be earned in the Legion expansion in general. The Legion expansion also one of the most content-rich expansions in the game's history. I think only beat out by Dragonflight and probably the War Within, because remember, we had a new patch every 77 days in Legion, so Legion as an expansion, super filled with things. So you're not only going to have a ridiculous amount of content to go play through with these new systems and all of this new progression, but you're also going to have all the cosmetics from the content packed expansion and a bunch of recolors and just a bunch of new cosmetics. So I think Legion Remix is just going to be incredibly popular. And personally, I really loved Mists of Pandaria Remix, Mists of Pandaria being my favorite expansion, Legion also being one of my favorite expansions, and with Legion, I think the gameplay is actually just going to be better. The Shatter Timeline is such a cool new thing to test. I think the open world of Legion was actually really good, didn't really have a big reason to do it, so having that be essentially turned into actual endgame content is going to be really cool. Mythic Plus with all the new progression systems is going to be absolutely ridiculous, and I think is also going to be some of the coolest gameplay we've ever seen in the game's history, because even though there's going to be super broken stuff, it's just going to be super cool to see what you can do with the different classes. Because another thing I didn't mention that was in Mists of Pandaria Remix is we're not going back to how the classes and specs were in Legion. We're going to be using how they are in the War Within. So our War Within talent trees, our War Within builds, all that type of stuff is going to be in Legion Remix. Now, presumably, we're also still going to have our hero talents as well. There may be the possibility we don't get those, but I highly doubt it. I think we're also going to be getting our hero talents, and that mixed in with all the new progression is just going to be absolutely ridiculous, but incredibly fun. So Legion Remix is honestly the thing I'm looking the most forward to for the rest of the War Within. Even though the War Within has been a really good expansion in my opinion, Legion Remix just sounds incredibly fun. fun. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.